Hey, what's up, everybody? Jeremy here. And guys, I'm very excited for the conversation we're going to have today because, as you know, natural health is a big part of my life. And I'm actually going to the gym right after this conversation, mainly because I couldn't this morning. Um, but our guest today is Dr. Cori Stern, and she's helping others to restore and optimize their health naturally since 2001. She actually was able to help herself of some childhood illnesses she was dealing with and actually end those. And now she's helping other people to change their life and change their health. Dr. Stern, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
It's a pleasure, Jeremy. I'm very excited to do this.
So I guess for those people listening, I mentioned that it's interesting because I feel like so many times the problems we end up solving in our life are ones that we've actually solved for ourselves a lot of times. And you've actually been somebody that had a health struggle, you got through it, and now you're helping others. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my whole entire childhood I spent with one illness or another, nothing serious, but I would have one throat infection after another, ear infections, bladder infections. I was always taking medicine, and I thought this was normal. I thought all kids did this. And by the time I was 15, I had a throat infection that just wouldn't resolve. I kept getting put on antibiotic after antibiotic, and it wasn't helping me. And I decided when I was 15 that medical doctors don't seem to know how to fix people's health. So I decided I was going to do it myself. And I started to do some research. This was back in the mid 70s. And there was a magazine that I stumbled on called Prevention.
Mm.
And that's something that's still around today. I think it's mostly online now.
Yeah,
Um,
we're always grabbing what's that one? It's like in every gym you go to. My wife reads it. Natural Awakenings, that one. We're always grabbing that one.
yeah, that wasn't around back then, as far as I'm aware.
Sure.
But I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I've advertised in there. So in prevention, I discovered information that I'd never been exposed to before, and that is that there is a connection between what you eat and your health.
Mm.
And I had no idea. Nobody ever told me that. My parents didn't tell me that. My teachers didn't tell me that. And looking over my diet, I realized I've been eating garbage my entire life. I was raised on a junk food diet since birth. So now here I was 15 years later and sick and couldn't recover. So I decided to completely change my diet on my own. I was working as a babysitter at the time, making $1 an hour, which was big money back then. And I spent all of my money on
I
my
think we
own
paid
food.
our last babysitter, by the way, like $25 an hour, which was wild.
Inflation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, continue.
Back then, $1 went a long way. So I was clean. I totally cleaned up my diet. I
Mhm.
stopped eating garbage, processed food. I took sugars out, anything artificial. I was eating real food for the first time. My parents thought that I was crazy, but I didn't care what anybody thought. And then I found a book at the health food store called Back to Eden. And it was a very old book written in the 20s, and it had every single herb on planet Earth and what kind of therapeutic benefit they had. And I started buying herbs and making concoctions, and I cured myself.
Wow.
And that kind of planted a seed that maybe I could help other people the same way when I grew up.
So let me ask you this because I know for a lot of people, the hardest thing is knowing, right? And I know you're big on education, you're big on like empowering people so they can make their own decisions, but I guess there's two questions in this. Number one, like where should we go to get good information, which is one part of it. And then I guess the second part of that is, like what things are actually important to our health.
Yes, those are big questions and they're excellent questions. So, the first question, where do you go to get true information? And it's not that easy to discern. And there's so much false information out there.
Yeah.
And I have people really look at where they got their original information. People become very certain inside themselves about this is good for me. When this happens, I do this. I
Hmm.
had a patient the other day that was feeling very symptomatic with cold-like symptoms. And she called my office to ask if there's anything we could recommend. And she said, I just sent my husband out for some Gatorade. I'm like, Gatorade? Gatorade is full of sugar and artificial colors and artificial flavors. Why would you want to drink that when you're coming down with what appears to be a cold? But these are the kinds of things, these remedies that were instilled in you as a child by your parents, by your teachers, by TV commercials, programming,
Hmm.
um, by shows like, doctor shows, by the news. And then now by the internet, you're not sure what to do. You Google it and you pick the best, the thing that suits you the best. So there is, again, so much misleading information that it is hard to know how to figure it out. And that's why I started a health channel. The whole purpose of that was to give people true information. So it's just a matter of deciding that you trust the information that I'm delivering based on years of clinical experience, real life experience. So I don't listen to what people say. I listen to what they say, but then I actually have to see it in real life. I have to see the outcomes, right?
Hmm.
So for over 20 years, I've watched outcomes. I've
Sure.
watched people who have a vegetarian diet. I've watched people who have a vegan diet. I've watched people who have a paleo diet, a carnivore diet. I look at their outcomes. So I've done so much research, so much studying, and it's emerging. There's still, because new poisons are being put into food.
Yeah.
So I have to stay on top of it. Sometimes I'll be eating something myself and say, wait a minute, how do I know that this is free of, fill in the blank of some chemical? And then I have to do research on it. So how do you know the information is right? You have to find somebody you trust, follow their lead, and see if you feel better, if you start actually improving, if your health improves. And
It's
then,
interesting about that is I feel like people tend to mix a lot of messages like, oh, this doctor said that, or that doctor said that, or this doctor says that. And then they wonder why they can't improve, right? Because they're kind of mixing like five different messages rather than just kind of choosing one and sticking with it.
yeah, people go into fear when it comes to their health. So they'll just grasp at this and that and this and mix it all up and just try everything and hope for the best. So I see people who I feel like should know better, people who are really authentically wanting to be healthy. And what they'll do is they might um, find a doctor that makes their own supplements or sells their own supplements, and they'll buy all the supplements that this doctor recommends. But meanwhile, they're still eating badly. And
Hmm.
they're thinking that the supplements are magic pills that are going to fix them. And I tell people all the time that supplements are not magic pills. The word supplement should mean supplement to a healthy diet. So if you're not getting this nutrient or you don't have enough of it or you're deficient in this nutrient, then you might need to supplement it. There's a lot to know about supplements also. And yeah, it is all very confusing. So not to toot my own horn, but one of the things that the feedback that I get from people who watch my videos is I've never heard it explained that clearly. I never fully understood what that meant. I never understood what diabetes really was. And now I do. And I followed your recommendations, and my blood sugar is improved. So understanding it is a big step in the right direction, because that way you can take full responsibility for
Yep.
your body.
You
Yeah.
mentioned supplements too, and it, sorry for kind of like going down a rabbit hole here, but I grab at the different things. I'm like, oh, I need to know more about that. And I guess looking at supplements, what do you think is confusing to people about supplements? Like, is it the labeling? Is it how you read a label? Is it like, what even the definition of supplement is? Like, what do you think is one of the biggest confusions for people around the idea of supplements?
Literally everything, because a lot of people don't know what the function of vitamins are in your body. They don't know what
Mm,
the function is of minerals. I have this is how I pose it to people,
sure.
right? This is the starting point. What is your body made out of? And the answer is it's made out of cells. Every part of you is made out of cells. Your brain is made out of brain cells. Your heart's made out of heart cells. Your skin is made out of skin cells. Every part of you is cells.
Hmm.
And did you know that your cells are always dying?
Yes,
Okay, so how come you're not dead?
because they replenish.
Right. And what does your body need? What material does it use to grow new cells?
The right nutrition.
Exactly. So it actually can also use the wrong nutrition. So
Mm,
if you're eating crappy stuff in the form of food or supplements, you're going to grow crappy cells, and one or more of your body parts is not going to function properly. And then you're not going to feel well, and that can lead to disease. If you're eating the correct nutrition, your cells will be healthy, and then your body will be functioning as it should, and you will feel good. So the question really is, what is nutrition? What is food?
mhm,
And food is things that grow on the ground, grow on a tree, or have a mother and are minimally processed.
mm.
So growing on the ground, fruits, vegetables, growing on a tree, nuts, fruits, having a mother. We're talking about things like different kinds of meat, fish, dairy.
Sure.
And minimally processed means you're not changing it, you're not altering it at
Mhm,
all, except maybe, cooking or sprouting or fermenting. That's it. That's a minimal process. So even with dairy, there's so much controversy about dairy. If you take milk from an animal and you pasteurize it, you heat it up to a high temperature, you cause the protein in the milk to be altered, and then it's not good for you.
That's the
So
same reason
everybody,
my wife won't use a microwave, by the way. She says it denatures the protein in the food
correct.
that you're cooking.
It does. It basically kills everything living in the food. So you're not even getting any nutrition out of it.
Mm.
So microwaves are banned in my patient
We
population.
we have one, but it's in the basement for popcorn. That's about it.
Okay. And I wouldn't even use it for popcorn. Yeah, I would
Okay.
just buy some non-GMO corn kernels and pop them on the stove top with some good quality butter
That's how my
or
toddler
avocado
likes it the
oil.
most because then she can help me.
Uh-huh. There you go. And that's really the only way that it's healthy. So getting back to the definition of
Yeah.
food, supplements should also be made out of food.
Mm.
And that's the biggest problem with most supplements is they're made in a lab. They're synthetic. They're actually chemicals. And
So is that
so
like a certain brand you should buy or something you should look for on a label? Like how do you know that it's whole food versus like a science project?
that's a great question. And there's not that many good quality whole food supplements out there.
Mm.
So yes, you would see it on the label. The companies that I use are generally only sold to practitioners.
Okay.
So it is a good idea to go to a practitioner to get advice about supplements rather than trying to guess on your own. So I see this happening all the time. People come in with a big bag full of supplements that they're taking, but they still don't feel well,
Hmm.
which tells us that it not necessarily what's needed. So letting somebody who has training tell you what's needed rather than you trying to figure it out and essentially wasting your money and possibly causing harm depending on what it is that you're taking. So I just want to give you the example of vitamin C. This is my favorite example
Hmm.
because if you go to the store and buy vitamin C, you are most likely buying ascorbic acid. If you look at your label of vitamin C, it's going to say ascorbic acid or calcium ascorbate on it.
Hmm. I've seen that in a label before. I didn't know what that was.
It's a very small part of the vitamin C complex. So in the United States, the FDA regulation is if you're going to call something vitamin C, it has to be ascorbic acid, but that's not vitamin C. That's not what it is. Vitamin C, like all vitamins, is a complex made up of many different parts, and ascorbic acid is just a 2% of it.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah, and most commercial vitamin C's are just synthetic chemicals made in China. So what are you actually taking? These are the problems that people run into, that they just trust that what the label says is what's going to be in the bottle. And supplements and food are two areas where you can't trust, and then you have foods or drinks where they don't have to put additives on the label. Alcohol, hard liquor,
Mhm.
hard seltzer, beer, wine. There's all kinds of chemicals in those things. I mean, bad stuff that they're not required to put on the label.
Mhm. Well, I guess looking at that then, like, so this is a very interesting conversation too. I didn't think it would go this way, but this has been very interesting. And you mentioned like different diets kind of early in our conversation. You're talking about like, there's, the carnivore diet, and there's this one, there's that one. Like, I'm a big believer, and maybe I'm totally wrong about this, and like just the idea of moderation. Like, if I feel like there's a good ratio on my plate, I feel like it's a pretty good day. But I guess when we're looking at like kind of a general rule for what we should be eating, like, is there one diet that's better than another? Is there one we should be focusing better than another? Or what are your thoughts on that?
Research demonstrates that humans are omnivores and mostly should be eating animal with some maybe small amounts of fruits and vegetables, and good quality fat, which should be animal fat. So it's very controversial. If there are any vegans or vegetarians watching, they're going to get upset. And I understand that, because I was actually one for 27 years. I was a vegetarian. So I get it. And I'm also an animal lover. So I get it. By the way, I get all of my food from an Amish farm, that I know the farmers. I know what they're feeding the animals. I know how they take care of the animals. I know how the animals are raised. So I feel okay about it. And I can, if people want a link to finding a small family farm with nutrient dense foods near them, in the US, I can give you that information. So research bears witness to the fact that, going back to as far as we can see, this is what people ate. Traditional diets were rich in animal protein, and it's called nose to tail eating, where you eat the entire animal, every part of it, including all the organs.
I feel like that's something to do in Europe, but we don't do here.
Well, we stopped doing it here. We used to,
Hmm.
but we stopped.
Hmm.
And when people are eating too much muscle meat, getting an imbalance of protein.
Hmm.
So what is protein made out of? Most bodybuilders know amino acids,
Amino
right?
acids, yeah.
Yeah. So muscle meat has certain amino acids, and organ meat has different amino acids. So if you eat too much muscle meat and not enough organ meat, you're getting an imbalance of your amino acids.
I never thought of that, by the way. That's really interesting.
Yes. And not only that, but organ meat also has certain vitamins that muscle meat doesn't have. The other part of it is the fat part of the animal. So animal fat has been vilified as causing heart disease and clogged arteries, and it's incorrect. If the animal is healthy, and the fat is healthy, it's full of fat soluble vitamins A, D, K,
Hmm.
which are necessary for overall health, for digestive health, for brain health, for fertility. It's one of the reasons why we're having a huge problem with infertility in this country. It's one of the reasons, not the only one, but because people are not eating the right fertility foods.
That's really interesting too, because it's now, if you look at that, we kind of see like a perfect storm, right? Like you mentioned, like we're not eating the same food content, but at the same time, like environmentally, like you look at like, the candles and incense we're burning, the plastics we're using and the things that are leaching out of them. So to me, like it really sets us up for failure. Like we have all these environmental things, then we also have like the things we're putting in our body.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I have a video on each of those topics, how fragrances are, in products are actually poisonous, how artificial colors are poisonous. And I take each additive or chemical ingredient, even not just, it's not just in your food, but you get it through your skin, personal care products, household cleaning products, your laundry detergent, your toilet paper,
Hmm.
for goodness sake. Your toilet paper is toxic if you're not using toxin-free toilet paper. And your tissue down there is very thin and delicate and has lots of vasculature. So you're just sucking in all those toxins right into your body. So the solution is not, don't go into overwhelm on it. Just when you're finished with this brand of toilet paper, when you don't have that one anymore, buy this brand instead. When you're done with this cleaning product, replace it with this one. So that's why I have a video on every one of these topics with resources, what to look for.
As an adult, how I handle this is so much different than how I handled it growing up. Because my mom was like, she would buy whatever was cheapest. So like our basement looked like we were storing it for the apocalypse. So we'd have like 10 years of toilet paper. I believe they're still using the same light bulbs from when I was a kid, like because she bought like thousands of dollars worth of everything. But like if you're with that mindset, like the cheapest one I'm guessing is probably going to be the dirtiest, right? Like you're not going to get the one that's best for you cheapest.
Right. So the question really is, if you're spending money on good quality food and personal care products and household products, what are you actually investing the money in?
Your
You're
health.
investing it in your health, in your body. And without that, you don't have anything else, right? So you can't enjoy going on a nice cruise if you're sick. That's how I look at it anyway. I don't even think twice about it anymore. There's nothing more important to me. That's my priority.
I guess what about like environmental toxins too? Because I know like I had actually, and I didn't realize it took me a long time to figure this out. I had a huge mold problem in my house. And until I found it, I'm like, that's why everybody's acting that way. So we did this like giant mold detox and stuff. Like, how big of a problem are like environmental toxins like that?
Huge. I mean, it's so you can't control everything, right? You
Sure.
can't control if you step outside and you breathe air pollution, you can't control that. Well, yeah, that's not even true. You can to a degree. I mean, I use these personal air purifiers that people wear. So my patients that are highly allergic or really sensitive really benefit from things like that. But still, you're always going to have some toxic exposure. So mold is a big problem very often because buildings are built with drywall now, and drywall, if it gets wet, if there's a leak, it's inside the wall, you don't see it, and it never dries. So that's very often how mold forms in houses, and it can make people really, really sick. We see it all the time. The good news is that if you see a practitioner like me, we can spot it, and then we
Hmm.
can clean your body up. We can, alert you to looking at what's going on in the house. I had a patient whose baby daughter had severe eczema, severe sensitivities to foods, and they finally realized that their mattress was moldy, and they
Oh
got
my
rid of it,
gosh.
and it was like life changing. So,
We
you
have so
know,
we have an old house. It was built in the 30s. And like we were all having these weird symptoms. Like it's not a cold. I don't know what the hell this is, but it's my nasal passages are definitely inflamed. It was this really weird situation. So I'm like, we're looking through everything. I'm like, we do have wallpaper in our bathroom, and it looks really old. I pulled down the wallpaper, Dr. Stern. I don't kid you. The walls were black. They were like fully black. It was the hardest cleanup I've ever had to do, but like everybody's health improved like within weeks.
yeah, that's so great that you discovered that, you even thought to do that, because people sometimes don't even, and if the mold really gets to you, you start having brain fog and you
Yep.
can't even think straight. So I actually have a video on mold. I interviewed a mold expert on my show, so to address this issue, and had a test for it if you need to, because sometimes you can't find it. So it's true though, we'll see whole families symptomatic and not being able to figure out why.
Well, Dr. Stern, this has been a great conversation. I think we've really handled a lot of different areas, which has been great for people listening. If they want to connect with you and find out more about what you're doing, where's going to be the best place for our listeners to go?
Well, I have a channel on YouTube called Dr. Cori Stern, Take Control of Your Health. It's also on Odyssey if for some reason you don't want to use YouTube. And if you have questions, you can email me at questions@drcori.com. Cori is Cori.
Very cool. Dr. Cori Stern, thank you so much for hanging out with me today.
Thank you for having me, Jeremy.